Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today we are doing a video that I did last year, and that is reading the YA Fantasy Goodreads Choice Awards nominees. That's a mouthful. It is like 5 to 6 in the morning, and I woke up and I saw Aidan Thomas tweeted that Lost in the Neverwoods is on the list. So I know one, but I don't know any of the rest. Lost in the Neverwoods was one that I was predicting would be on there. I'm gonna try and read them all. Well, the top 10. We're gonna get the first reaction together. Alright, here it is. Goodreads Choice Awards. Ooh, okay, so the first three I see are interesting. Okay, so a couple of my predictions are already here. How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories. I thought that might be there, but I was like, oh, but that's like short stories, and that's probably going to win. Cruel Princess stuff always wins. Then we have The Ones We Were Meant to Find by Joan He. That was another prediction. These Hollow Vows was not one that I had thought of. Our Violent Ends was one I had thought of. Rule of Wolves by Leah Bardugo was one I thought of, and that's like definitely gonna get in. Iron Widow by Ziran J. Zhao. Then Anyway the Wind Blows by Rainbow Rowell. I had a feeling this was gonna be on there, and if it gets through, I might read it, okay? It's probably gonna get through, but I'm not sure will I read it. Then A Sky Beyond the Storm by Saboteur. That is on the list, and again, this is another one that I thought might be on the list, and I'm happy if it gets through because I have read it. I didn't love it, but I read it, so that's good. And Realmbreaker by Victoria Aveyard. I thought that was adult. Lore by Alexandra Bracken, another one I kind of had thought of. Six Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim, another one I had thought of, and I would be 100% okay with reading that. A Vow So Bold and Deadly. We Free the Stars. I do have the first book there. Gods and Monsters by Shelby Mahurin. Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare, another one that is almost guaranteed to get through. House Apollo by Crystal Sutherland. Namesake by Adrian Young. Lost in the Netherwoods by Aidan Thomas. Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. And then The Gilded Ones. So what I will do is probably this morning while I'm on the bus, I will go through all of these, write out the average rating and the number of ratings that they have. Number of ratings is more important than average rating, but I'll write both down, highlight the top 10 of each, and the ones that intersect are the ones I'm definitely going to read. A couple things to go through is a lot of these are sequels. Like a whole load of these are sequels. And I haven't read the first book for a good few of them. I feel like it's unfair for Our Violent Ends as well because that literally just came out today. That happens, it's really strange the way that they work it because it's books that came out before the 22nd, but it's like it should be books that came out before the first round. Usually I'm open to reading anything, but number one, if Namesake by Adrian Young gets through to the top 10, I am not reading it. I read Fable last year for this video and I despised it, and I'm not continuing. I'm just not doing it. I'm pretty sure Chain of Iron, Rule of Wolves, and A Sky Beyond Storm, and probably The King of Elfhame will get through, and maybe also Anyway the Wind Blows. I have read 3 of those, which would be very helpful to me. And How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories is illustrated and also very short, and I always found Holly Black's writing really quick, so I would be okay with reading that as well. If a sequel does get through, which is very possible, I will read the first book in the series, which I know is not completely comparable, but it's the best I can do because I can't read like 3 books to get caught up. So it is now much later in the month. I started this and then I didn't talk about the books that I've already read. So we're gonna do some speedy reviews of the first 3 books that I read for this because I actually read them before this challenge. So I already have stuff all out there on the internet for you to find. So for Chain of Iron, I have a whole vlog and it's in my March wrap up. Then for Rule of Wolves, it's in my April wrap up and also in my ranking the Grishaverse books, and then also for A Sky Beyond the Storm, that's in my May wrap up, I believe. I'm going to put a 1-minute timer. Yes, I'm going to put a 1-minute timer and see if I can quickly review those books in that amount of time. So I have it ready. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, go. So Chain of Iron is the second book in the Last Hour trilogy, which is like the millionth series in the Shadowhunter world, and this follows the children of the people in the Infernal Devices. And this book I gave a 4 out of 5 stars overall, and Cassandra Clare is just generally not an author who really wows me anymore. Her plots I feel are very similar and repeated a lot, and that's like extremely frustrating. Like, I've been here, I've seen all of this done before. She also started to change some lore that we have seen before, which again really frustrated me, and I feel like the characters just aren't as lovable as some, and there's also like not really that like banter, I suppose, that we've seen with a lot of previous characters and friendships and all of that. But that being said, there were some of my favorite moments, like heart, like swooning. I was loving it, and that was Jessie and Lucy. Those were like 5-star moments, but the rest was like 3-star. 2 seconds left. Speed review number 2 is of Rule of Wolves. Let the time start now. So with this one, I gave it 3 stars. I found that the pacing was much better than King of Scars. King of Scars was very slow a lot of the way through it, and then it kind of picked up at the end. This one, it kind of kept you interested throughout, but it still felt very disjointed. So it was like Nina and then everyone else, and so it still very much felt like 2 different stories where I thought it would come together in this book. So also there was a big plot twist at the end of King of Scars, which I hated, but then it didn't even really play into the plot of this book, which, what was the point? And then there were some moments in here that I felt were purely for shock value, and then there was other moments that I felt were like purely fan service, and so it was very strange to read that. And then there was also one last thing that happened in the final battle, which I thought was so silly, and it made me roll my eyes so bad. 2 seconds left. We have one more speed review to do, and that is of A Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabbath here. So I read this back in April, by the way, and I swear I read it back in like January. I could not remember anything about this. But anyway, so speed review starts. 3, 2, 1, go. So I've had very mixed feelings about this series. So it was 4-3-4-3. And this book, I was actually really enjoying it. Like, I didn't think too much was happening, but it was keeping me intrigued. The pacing was all right. It was a little boring, but it was building and building. And then the final battle happened. And honestly, that was like a 2-star. Like, I hated how this book ended. I hated that, like, last 30% so much. Like, I knew who Saboteur was willing to kill off and who hurt and all of this. And I actually found that a lot of it was very predictable. And then there was just some really weird and honestly kind of stupid twists. That is obviously all personal preference. And then there was one character that she tried to like give depth at the very last moment. I'm like, no, it is way too late for you to make me care about this character. Like, that was the main complaint I had throughout the series, that it was like good or bad. And there was very few people who had actually any nuance to them. The only exception was Helene, who remained, I don't know, I ran out of time. Anyway, Helene was my favorite character throughout the whole series because I felt she was the only one who had any depth. So yeah, so I was just very meh about that book. It started strong, ended really, really weak for me, and so 3 stars overall. But again, that would be in my April wrap-up if you want more details. Hello, I only just woke up a little while ago. The top 10 should be out now, so we're gonna just quickly go through them. Okay. Iron Widow's there, guys. I really wanted to read that. 5 that I have now read are in there, so that's good. So A Sky Beyond the Storm, Rule of Wolves, How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories, Chain of Iron, and Anyway the Wind Blows. Those were all ones that I was pretty confident were going to get through. And they were in both the top 10 for average rating and a number of ratings, so I knew they were extremely possible to get in. And then the rest of them, I actually don't have my notebook with me. I need to get my notebook. Full list: Our Violent Ends, Once Upon a Broken Heart, Sky Beyond the Storm, The Gilded Ones, Iron Widow, Anyway the Wind Blows, I'm on the other hand, Rule of Wolves, How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories, Chain of Iron, Lore. So yeah, that is a decent enough list. And I'm not super interested in Lore or Our Violent Ends or Once Upon a Broken Heart. I haven't read These Little Delights yet, but I'll read that instead because that's the way I do it. But most of these are either sequels that I read the series for or the start of the series, so that's handy for me. So I won't completely be cheating. It's only one that I'm cheating on. I am surprised Namesake didn't get in there. It had a lot of ratings. House of Hollow was another one. It had pretty high average rating, and it was also extremely high on the number of ratings. So Once Upon a Broken Heart, Our Violent Ends, and Iron Widow, those are the ones that are kind of like a bit of wild cards in there because they are not in the top 10 number of ratings, are in the top 10 average ratings. That's why I didn't just read like the top 10 number of ratings, because it is hard to predict sometimes. Sometimes there will be ones that will sneak in, and all 3 of those did. And I'm very happy about it. And so then Lore and the Gilded Ones are both in the top 10 number of ratings. They have, a lot of people have read them, but they don't have as high as reviews as some of the other books on this list, because Lore has a 3.85, but it does have 37,000 ratings now. Hello, so I'm here to talk about the books that I've read. I now have 3 books read. Well, I now have 6 books read because I already had read 3. So currently it goes A Sky Beyond the Storm, Rule of Wolves, Chain of Iron. But now I have 3 more books to add into that. So the first book I read was How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories by Holly Black. So this is a short story about Cardan from the Cruel Prince series. So it is like, yeah, so it is part of that world, but it is not an actual like full-length book or anything. Yes, it's a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. So as I said, this is a 4 stars, but I think I would put it lower than Chain of Iron, but obviously higher than Rule of Wolves. Very short glimpses of Cardan's life. So it begins when he is a child, and then we see, you know, as he's a teenager, and how he, you know, meeting Jude and small events that happen in the Cruel Prince, and then all leads to after the events of it. And so at first the little glimpses don't really seem related, but by the end you see how all of the story, it connects. And I really enjoyed it, and I think I was kind of surprised because I had very mixed feelings on the Cruel Prince. It was an up and down series for me, but I did really overall enjoy this. It actually made me like want to go back and reread the whole series, which I think is a great thing for a book to be able to do. I was never the biggest fan of Cardan or Jude or any of the characters in the Cruel Prince. I didn't find them that interesting either. Everyone says how complex they are and all that, and I'm like, they're okay. But in this one, I did actually feel like I was actually getting a proper glimpse at the characters, and so I really enjoyed it for that reason. I've never been a big fan of Holly Black's writing style. That was one of the main things that let that series down. Also the fact that the plot didn't start until like the last 30% of a book. That also annoyed me. But with this, it really worked, her writing style, for these short glimpses. It didn't feel so repetitive. Oftentimes, like, she is just kind of listing stuff off, and I don't really like that. But in this, because it revolves around stories themselves, it has a very kind of more traditional storytelling style, and it really worked for these like short little chapters and all of that. So I really enjoyed that. Also, the illustrations were really nice. I really loved those. And yeah, so it was really short, it was really quick to read, and it was very readable. I find that with a lot of Holly Black stuff, even though I'm not the biggest fan of it. It's very quick. I read it in about 2 hours. The next book I read was Anyway the Wind Blows by Rainbow Rowell. And this was the 3rd book in the Simon Snows trilogy, which follows Simon, who is the chosen one, and he is fighting this bad guy, and he has a terrible roommate who he hates, but actually he doesn't hate, he actually loves him. And I did not enjoy the 2nd book. I really enjoyed the 1st one. I did not enjoy the 2nd one. I gave this one 3 stars. It is a lower 3 stars than A Sky Beyond the Storm and Rule of Wolves though, so that is currently in last place. But even then, it was actually decent. I enjoyed it. It wasn't anything spectacular, but it was solid. And as I said, I read the 2nd book and I really didn't like it. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. And I was not really going to bother picking this one up, but I was like, well, it's on the list, I might as well. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I got to see how it all ended, but also it was nothing incredible. If like, it's nothing mind-blowing. It's nothing that's like, oh my god, that was like the best finale. Like, it was okay. I'm glad I did it, but like also, if I hadn't read it, would my life have been changed in any way? No. I immediately prefer this to the 2nd book, and that's because even though there wasn't much plot, from the start of this book, it started dealing with the characters' personal issues way better and way more clearly than the 2nd book did. The biggest complaint is there was just like no plot whatsoever, like nowhere to be found. Was there a plot? There was like a kind of a plot, but like it really didn't actually start to affect things until maybe the 50% mark, and then like really started to affect things maybe like the 80% mark, which really isn't much. And then it was like 3 different groupings. So there was Agatha, then there was Penelope and Shepherd, and then there was Simon and Baz. And they were all doing their own things, but yet none of it was that substantial. So And then at least like when Penelope and Shepard were done with their thing, their like plots met up with Simon and Baz. But Agatha, what was Agatha doing in this book? And like that's another thing, is like while Simon's issues kind of got dealt with in this book, I don't really feel like Agatha's did get dealt with as much. And that was kind of a bit of a shame. It felt very disjointed. And yeah, so her plot just felt completely pointless. And yeah, there wasn't much plot anyway though. But if you are someone who really loves these characters, you're probably going to enjoy this book. There is a lot of like character relationships, you know, seeing their friendships and their romance and all of this. So if you really love these characters, you're probably gonna love this book. And then the other thing I would like to point out is I do feel like throughout this book, she was just like pretending the second book never happened, probably because many people do not enjoy it. So I wasn't mad about this, but like it did feel like it was like at points like only every so often would they mention stuff that happened in the second book. And it was like there was stuff that happened in the second book that I feel like should be talked about. And it wasn't really ever talked about. So really easy read. I flew through it. It was nothing special. It was okay. I enjoyed my time with it, but it's not a book that I'm going to be like remembering for very long. Like I've already started to forget bits of it. So yeah, so as I said, it is definitely one that if you are a fan of the series, you should definitely try it out. I don't think this needed to be a series, full stop. One last book to update you on, and then we will be up to date on what I've read so far. Now I only have 4 more to read. But the book I read was Iron Widow by Ziran J. Zhao. And guys, so good! So good! I do think it's going to be a 4 stars. I haven't run it through CAWPILE yet. I definitely recommend it. But it just didn't quite get there for me. So this story, it takes inspiration from historical China and actual figures in the world. But it is actually a futuristic world where there's like these giant robots and men and women are like piloting and fighting against these other creatures. And oftentimes the women pilots will die, but the men will be fine. And our main character, her sister, is killed by one of these men pilots, and so she offers herself up as a concubine, and she ends up going into battle with him, and she kills him. And this makes her an Iron Widow. She's then paired with a really dangerous pilot who kills basically everyone that goes in the cockpit with him. She is like determined to figure out why the system is so biased against women. I really enjoyed that blend of historic and futuristic. It was very interesting, but I wasn't the biggest fan of it because another series I can think of that kind of does like the futuristic but also kind of historical thing is the Red Queen series by Victoria Aveyard. Like that is supposed to be like in the future, but also like, you know, the way they dress and how, you know, the royalty is and how like civilization is very historic. I think it is hard to make it work, and I do think that they did a good job with it, but I'm not sure is it my favorite kind of a setting to have, but I was still interested by it anyway, so it wasn't terrible or anything. Though I will say there was one historical thing that they talked about, which was like binding feet, and every time it was spoken about, it made me cringe so bad. I'm not a person who is very squeamish when it comes to books or anything. Like I can read about people being impaled and all of this and it doesn't bother me. There's a select few things that really bother me. One is eyeballs, the other is feet, and the other is like fingers and stuff. Like when they, like in a fantasy book, if they're like trying to break people's fingers and stuff, I'm like, no, 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 no. And same with like feet and eyeballs. If someone tears out someone's eyeball, no. Like you can cut their head off, I am fine with that. But when it comes to the eyeballs, no. So that was definitely like a personal preference thing. But I do understand why it was such a big thing in the book, but I did not enjoy that. At the start of the book, you are quite thrown into the world, but I did actually like how that was done, because at first you're like, what? And the way it's explained was very gradually, but it was enough that you could understand what was happening in the moment. And so it was not very info dumpy, which is something that I don't really like. I don't like a load of just like info dump and then, okay, now let's get on with the story, because I will forget that stuff. Also, our main character was definitely a little not like other girls, but I still enjoyed her. And the most important thing about Not Like Other Girls is as long as she doesn't hate other girls. I hate the girl on a girl hate, and she didn't. And even then, like the Not Like Other Girls, it was like, oh yeah, I'm not like other girls because I'm murderous. And I'm like, fair, you were not like other girls maybe. But she was quite like revenge driven and bloodthirsty, and It was quite intense for a YA novel. I will give that point to them. I did enjoy the writing style. It was very simplistic, but it wasn't like boring or anything like that. It was very straightforward, and I think it was very easy to read, which is always good. And while I was reading it, I just kept thinking that it would make a very cool like film. Let me just say the ship in here. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Yes. Top tier. Top tier. I do wish there was like a little more development of the relationship, but there was enough there that I was really rooting for the ship. So that's all you really need. Your imagination can do the rest. But I will say there is something mentioned in like the Goodreads synopsis and all of that that does not happen until 80% of the way through. Why would you put that in the synopsis? My main complaint with this, because I really enjoyed a lot of it. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the characters. I really enjoyed the action, and I really enjoyed the world building and all of that. But I feel like there was a lot of action to hide the fact that the plot hadn't really started yet. It's kind of hard to say because it felt like the plot was starting and stopping. So like at the very beginning of the book, she is giving herself up as a concubine. So the plot is there. And then for like the next 20%, you know, it's just like a lot of action and moving people around so everyone is in the right place. And then, you know, like a small bit of plot happens. And then for the next 20%, it's like the relationship building. And then it was like, you know, 75%, they were like, okay, here's the proper plot. And that was my biggest complaint. I'm like, I really enjoyed the plot. Like, it was fascinating. But it felt very rushed then at the end. And I feel like we didn't really get to hang around with that information we had gotten and really like develop it. And there is going to be a sequel, so I presume it's going to be developed more in the sequel. I will say that things got real dark real quick at the end of the book. And yeah, and I did really enjoy where the story went at the end. And so I'm very excited for a sequel, but it just didn't quite get to the 5-star mark. And on Twitter, I got everyone to vote for what I should read next, and the answer was These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. I have my cozy blanket, and I have finished These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong, so let us talk. Because, oh boy, controversial opinions coming your way. Number one, I did only read the first book because I don't have time to read both. And so it's not a real comparison. Obviously, the second book could be better. It could be worse. It could be the exact same. I don't know. And I'm not sure will I read the second book because I didn't really enjoy this, which is a very unpopular opinion. Why? Why do I have to be the unpopular opinion? And I think this is really just confirming to me, again, that there is a lot of YA and YA tropes that I am growing out of. So I think this book just actually had a lot of tropes that I just don't like, full stop. And so that did not help the case. It is a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in 1920s Shanghai. Juliet and Roma are part of two different gangs, and there is a madness spreading through the city, and it is making people like tear out their throats and all of this. Which, problem number one, when people had read this, they were like, wow, it's really gory for a YA book. And I'm like, no. Like, they literally just like, their hands went to their throats and then it like fades to black. Where's the gore? Like, okay, like there was a couple of descriptions of like bugs and stuff that you're like, ooh, nasty. But okay. Before I started this book, I already had a problem. And so I'm like, maybe I was just kind of salty starting it, so it didn't get the best shot. Because I got spoiled for the ending of the second book on Twitter by none other than Chloe Gong herself. So I know what happens at the end of the second book. So I don't really care about reading it. And it already like put me off reading the first one because it's like, I know how it ends. Why should I bother? I will say the strongest part, I give this a 3 out of 5 stars. I don't think I mentioned that. I put it through CAWPILE earlier this morning. Plot was way higher than the rest. The place that was the worst was characters. I really hated them. I actually was really interested in like the plot itself. It is actually more of a mystery novel than a fantasy novel, but I wasn't mad about that. I found it actually very fascinating, and I did want to know what was happening. I was let down at the end by the end reveal, which I didn't end up docking it because I was like, it's okay. It was like a bit predictable, but it's not the end of the world. It started to drag a bit in around the 50% mark. It felt like maybe like 50 pages or something could have been cut out of there. And I was also interested in the politics of the world and the gang and all of that. That was about it. So we're going to talk about the characters. Roma, no personality whatsoever. Side characters, okay. And like the main side characters, so Juliet's cousins and one of Roma's cousins as well, they were very two-dimensional. There's no depth to any of them. And Roma, for like a love interest, so incredibly boring. Like, where is the personality? I don't see it. He is not an interesting love interest at all. And that is another thing. So they were together previously, and then something happened, and now they're heartbroken and they don't love each other anymore, except they do. And I know it's in the future again. And that annoys me, which is, I can't remember what book it was. It was like maybe 2 or 3 months ago. I read a book and it had the same thing where like between the two characters, something had happened to them, like between them, like a couple of months ago or a couple of years ago or something like that. And they weren't saying what it was, but they just keep mentioning it. They'd be like, I remember what happened, and then just move on. And that annoys me so much. Stop bringing it up. If you're not going to tell me what happened, stop bringing it up. Mention it maybe once or twice, sprinkled here and there, but it just constantly got brought up. You know, something happened between them. Something happened. I'm like, yeah, I get it. Something happened between them, but you don't want to tell me it because you're trying to make it all angsty and build it up. But I don't feel anything because I don't care about them. That brings us to one more point, and that is Juliet. And I couldn't stand her. Her character in particular, but also just a lot of the interactions and other characters as well, and their interactions really made me cringe. And like, that very rarely happens to me. Even when reading YA, I usually enjoy YA, even if it's a bit tropey or a bit whatever. I found her interactions really cringy. And so the way Juliet is written, she is obviously supposed to be badass and tough, but I did not believe it for a single second. Not at all. And like, there was one scene really early in the book, like very at the start, she's like in their club and she has a lighter and she offers it to someone, and they're like, why do you have a lighter? You don't even smoke. And it's like, I guess it's supposed to be like some sort of like tough thing that she has fire with her. And I'm like, and like, I swear I got flashbacks to like The Fault in Our Stars, and I was like, it's a metaphor. Yeah, so it was little things like that I couldn't believe her as a character for a second. And it made me feel really bad because a lot of people really love her. And I don't get it. And I think it is a me thing. I do 100 up, like hands down. I do think that is a me thing and a growing out of YA thing. So that was how I felt. It was a very low 3-star, but it was a 3-star. And it is at the bottom of the list so far. And I didn't think it would be. I didn't think I would love it. I didn't think it was going to be Iron Widow because that was like so good. But I was hoping it was going to be a 4-star. Oh, so it is now Thursday, which means the results are out. So I still have 3 books to read, but at the moment, my winner is Iron Widow. And I'll keep you updated with my list as we go on. But I'll put on the screen the average rating, the number of ratings, and then so my predictions is number 1 is going to be Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. Number 2 is going to be How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories. Number 3 is going to be Chain of Iron. Number 4 is going to be Lore. Number 5 is going to be Anyway the Wind Blows. Number 6 is going to be Iron Widow. That one's a bit of a gamble because I feel like a lot of people are voting for it because it's so pretty, and the author, they are like really funny on Twitter and everything. So there's a lot of hype. Number 7, I think, is going to be The Gilded Ones. Number 8 is going to be A Sky Beyond the Storm. Number 9 is going to be Our Violent Ends, because that only came out on the day. But again, that one could be way higher up on the list because it's really hyped. Then number 10, Once Upon a Broken Heart. Let us go and find it. I have seen people saying disappointed but not surprised at the results, so I'm going to guess that means Sarah J Maas's one. Young adult fantasy, it is showing Rule of Wolves as the winner, so I was right. So, oh, King of Elfhame was number 5. Interesting. That had the second highest number of ratings, I think. So I was really expecting that to be way higher up. So Rule of Wolves is number 1, Chain of Iron is number 2, Lore is number 3, Anyway the Wind Blows is number 4, How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories is 5, Iron Widow is 6, which I think, did I get that one exactly right? Yeah, I did. Go me. Number 7 is The Gilded Ones, I got that exactly right as well. Number 8 is Our Violent Ends, which I didn't get right. Number 9 is Sky Beyond the Storm, and number 10 is Once Upon a Broken Heart, which again I got right. I did a pretty good job of predicting them. They're like, I wasn't too bad. It's just, yeah, as I said, King of Elfhame really threw me off.
So I'm not going to talk about these for too long. I'll let you pause and have a look at these if you really want. But I think it does go to show that, yes, number of ratings is the most important factor. But there are some that have really high average ratings that can definitely sneak in there and get really high good results as well.
It is now the 10th of December, so I finished another book, so 8 books down, 2 more to go. So I finished Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. See, this is why this video is like, it's really just not that exciting, because it's like 3 stars, 3 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars. So, like, at least last year I had some that I like truly despised. I feel like it's not going to make the most interesting of videos, but oh well, here we are. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I kind of had a feeling it would be either 3 or 4 stars, but I thought like a high 3 or a low 4, but it was actually fairly in the middle of the 3-star range. It got the exact same score as Anyway the Wind Blows by Rainbow Rowell, but I'm putting this above Anyway the Wind Blows because this got a higher enjoyment score on CAWPILE, which I think at the end of the day, that is the most important thing to me. This one, I feel like I just don't have very strong opinions on, full stop. It's not things that I like really liked about it and really didn't like. I just feel it was okay. I would like to say I have not read the original CARVAL series. You don't have to. I don't think that made it like less understandable or anything to me. The world, all that. Maybe I would have like a bit more, you know, of an insight into this magic and all of this if I had read those. But I don't think I was like lost or anything because of it. It was very understandable. But perhaps I would have enjoyed them more. But CARVAL has never really interested me that much, so I'm probably not going to read that series, and I'm not sure will I continue with this one. It was fairly predictable, I feel. It was a girl called Evangeline, and she praised the Prince of Hearts to stop a wedding between her stepsister and who she thinks is, you know, her love. And then in exchange for 3 kisses. And then things go from there. And obviously, like, as soon as they started making a deal, I was like, sweetheart, you should be careful with what words you use. And so I always really enjoyed that kind of like trickster kind of a thing, that fairy language, as people often say, you know, in the, like the folk of the air and in like Stardust and all of those kind of stuff. It's also just a very Irish fairy thing. Irish fairies are very mean. Out of probably all of the books I have read for this had some of the most like quotable lines. I think the line was something like, every story has the potential for infinite endings. And like those kind of lines, I did really like it. But overall, the writing, it didn't blow me away. Like, I heard she has a very like lyrical and atmospheric writing style. And I don't really get it. Like, it was a fine writing style. As I said, it had some very nice quotable lines. But aside from that, it was just okay. There was like a small bit of whimsy and all of that, but honestly not that much. Like the idea that heroes don't get happy endings, which, I mean, we all know from reading YA fantasy, yeah, they do. And I imagine this will probably end up with her getting a happy ending, but I like the idea that she couldn't. That's kind of really all I have to say about it. I mean, which is not a lot. I liked it. I didn't love it. It didn't have anything particularly mind-blowing out of this world about it, but there was nothing like horrible about it. Like, the characters, they were okay. Like, Evangeline was a little stupid at times, but she was just young and naive. And Jax, he's an interesting character. I do believe he appears in the CARVAL series, and he is definitely very intriguing. I may have had more attachment to him if I had read the CARVAL series, because I think he's someone that people really love. Plot, there was one, which it's better than you can say for some of these books. I did find that like it was a little frustrating being in Evangeline's head. Like I could understand the decisions she was making because she was trying to think, okay, well, he's clearly trying to trick me, so I'm gonna do the opposite. But then he's double bluffing me, so I'm gonna do exactly what he wants me to do. And I was just like, oh, sweetie. If you like love the CAWPILE series, I imagine you will probably find more enjoyment and be able to find like the connections. Oh, this person was in this or whatever. I don't know. Is there a lot of crossover? I don't know. But if you haven't read the CAWPILE series and, like me, have no intention of picking up the CAWPILE series, I wouldn't write this off. As I said, I had a good time with it, so you might too. What day is it? I don't know anymore. But I have read 9 books now. Ugh, the thought of reading, which is not a good sign, but I will persevere. The 9th book I read was so good, and it was The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. And why is this one not getting so much hype? I remember seeing it really hyped last year and earlier this year, like before it came out. But since it's come out, I've seen no one talk about it. And I really, really enjoyed it. One of the best I've read so far. It got the exact same score as Chain of Iron on CAWPILE, but I think I'm going to put it up above Chain of Iron. And I'm not sure, is that because I actually prefer to Chain of Iron or because I've just read it more recently, so it's clearer in my mind. I'm not 100% sure, but it got the same rating, so I'm going to just put it above because I think I prefer it. It was going to be way higher. It was going to be like really close to Iron Widow, but then right at the end there was like kind of a plot hole that definitely like took me out. I was like, wait, what? Why did this happen if this is the reasoning behind it all? And so that was like the biggest letdown of it. But I enjoyed the whole experience up to that point so much that I still like, I didn't dock it that much, but like that could be a reason that you might really not like it. But also there is going to be sequels, so it could actually be explained how that all made sense. I'm not sure will I read the sequels because this stood on its own very well. Like it's a really good standalone if you want to read it as a standalone. Like it finishes off in a place where you can like just imagine for yourself what's going to happen. And I think there's going to be 2 more books, and so I'm really unsure because I feel like the second book's going to just be filler and then the third book stuff's going to happen. I was so surprised by this because I heard the same synopsis like everyone gives about this. So we're in this village and our main character is going through the purity ritual, and that's where they make them all bleed, and if you bleed red you're pure and all of that. And our main character bleeds gold and is like sentenced to death, and then she is saved by this woman and taken to be a soldier in the Emperor's army. Like that is the synopsis I heard. But there is something in that synopsis that they are completely missing out on. And so it happens in like the first 40 pages and I was so surprised. And so I'm not going to tell you what it is because I want you to be surprised as well. So it was a really promising start. You were thrown straight into the action. Like it wasn't like a battle scene or anything, but like the author did like waste any time. She like just straight away went, okay, so it's the day of the purity, and like straight into it. Like no hesitation, and I really liked that. I'm shaking my hand so much, I'm sorry, I'm just really excited about it. So then we got introduced to a side character called Britta, who I loved that character. She was like just like the best friend a person could ask for. That was an element of this book that I truly loved. The friendship was so strong, and there was a small romantic kind of will they won't they thing, but that was not an extremely important plot line. And I will say that the friendships were like way more important to the story than any sort of hints of romance, and I really liked that. A lot of it was just about these girls, teens, women, whatever, just all banding together to support each other through everything that they're going through. And it also just dealt with a lot of their mental health. A lot of them have been through a lot since they have discovered that they were not pure and have been treated terribly because of this. And it really explores like the mental toll that has on them and how they like all help each other through it. And I really loved it. The world was fascinating. I loved the magic system and the history and how we learned about it. I loved the characters and their friendships and how they banded together, and the plot as well was really interesting. It's all about them trying to fight these monsters. The one thing that let it down was there was kind of a bit of a plot hole in the explanation of what was happening. But other than that, it was so good, and I highly recommend it. Hello everyone, so we did it. I finished Lore. I read it in one day. I did not like it, but I did it. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I didn't love it, but I also don't have anything really to say. I was just bored most of the way through it. And I will say, this just had a real disadvantage being the last book that I read, because I was so burnt out. I was not in the mood to read, but I pushed through it. So, I mean, I wasn't going to love it anyway, but it could have been like a 3-star if I had read it when I was more in the mood for it. It is my least favorite book of this video. What a way to finish. It was an interesting concept, and it was ambitious. I don't think it worked the way that the author wanted to though. And I was just so fed up of reading books where women are just treated horribly. And in this book, it felt so unnecessary to the plot. It did not add much to the plot. It didn't add anything to it, except for like 1 or 2 moments of commentary, but that wasn't the main focus of it. I'm going to take down this place that is treating women like crap. That's not what happened in this book whatsoever. Like, what was the point of it? Like, the world building was so bad, and like, how is it bad? Because you have the work done for you. The Greek myths are thousands of years old. They were already there for you, and you know, it's set in like New York. That's already there for you. How did you mess up the world building so bad? Like, it was so hard to understand, and I am someone who reads high fantasy, confusing books. I love them. This was just so poorly explained, and it didn't make sense. I did not care for the characters one bit. Like, they had no personality whatsoever. I did not care for them one tiny little bit. Their friendships, their relationships all fell so flat. They were just there. Like, they didn't have any sort of depth to them. They were just there as vessels for this story to play out. I was slightly interested in the plot. It had its moments, which is why it's not 1 star. Even the villain, oh my god, talk about such a bad villain. Because it's, again, just like a cartoon villain. Mwahaha, I'm evil for the sake of being evil. And it just felt, ugh. I didn't like the way the gods are portrayed. At first I thought I was really gonna like it because it's like, hey, the gods suck, which is 100% true. But then it was like, oh, these gods suck, but these gods don't. Which, one of the gods that they were like, don't really suck is like Zeus. Like, there's no Zeus slander in this book. Where's the Zeus slander? Like, he's the worst of them. And yeah, and so then, and I hated how it ended. I hated it so much. Like, it was so unsatisfying for me. It wasn't explained enough for me, the backstory behind it all. Like, it was kind of just glossed over. Maybe that's why. I read it, I gave it 2 stars. I have read 10 books. Well, I read, what, 7? But I did it. So, I can't remember my ranking. 10th is Lore, 9th is These Violent Delights, 8th is Anyway the Wind Blows, 7th, Once Upon a Broken Heart, 6th is Sky Beyond the Storm, 5th is Rule of Wolves, 4th is How the Killing of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories, 3rd, Chain of Iron, 2nd, The Gilded Ones, and number 1 was Iron Widow.
I forgot to put it into the video, but here's my results compared to the official results. There's not a lot of agreement. There's a couple that are within 1 space of each other, like Chain of Iron, King of Elfhame, and These Violent Delights, but it's not a lot of similarities.
And out of this, which ones I would really recommend would be Iron Widow and The Gilded Ones. Well, 2 solid recommendations have come out of this, which is good, I suppose. Thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. I know this was a long one. If you did, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.